Hello, Editing Jennifer here. I decided to do a little bit of a prequel to launch into the Nomad ranking that I just did, which I believe was 31 palettes at the end of it. And then I'm going to talk about the Nomad ranking I did a couple years ago with much fewer palettes because they had fewer launches, obviously. So in that palette, I talked about quality. I talked about how cohesive the color story was and how versatile the looks you can make with it were while still fitting within the theme of the palette. And of course, I looked at the theme of the palette in the sense of relation to place, how well Nomad does Nomad. And while I'm pretty happy with that color story, it aligned with my preferences. At the end of the day, it was still preference driven. It wasn't really that much different than any other person going about the day and saying, I like this one and I don't like this one. And I wanted mine to be a little bit more data driven. So instead of doing it preference driven, where I said, hey, I really like this palette and I use it a lot, what I did was I did a matrix and I did a 1 through 5 level of frequency and then a 1 through 7 relative for how long I've had it. And I just did a little ratio and that gave me a frequency of usage relative to how long I've had the palette, so I can tell which palettes I really love. So a palette that I've used a lot but I've had it a really long time might not stand up to a palette I've used maybe slightly less, but it's brand new. And then of course it also allows me to compare older palettes and see which ones I reach for and which ones I don't. And it is the kind of the reverse of being preference driven, therefore I use it a lot, because now I'm looking at it and saying, well, I use it a lot, it must be something I really like. And I do find that those rankings were very, very different. There are some palettes that kind of surprised me, but I find myself going to them, and that's a really true testament to how versatile some of these looks are. Even if, the entire color story isn't that good, there might be a saving shade in it. So there's a lot of reasons that happened. I will give a couple of caveats. Going in first off the bat. So first, I ordered Pacific Northwest and Chris Mark, but they didn't make it into this review. I recorded over a month ago. Chris Mark wasn't even released, so I was unable to create any sort of knowledgeable or informed ranking of how those palettes will perform. So I did not include them in this video. I did include the two previous releases, and I kind of give them honorable mentions based on how I expect them to perform. If you follow Patty Bean, you'll also notice that right around the time last month when I was recording this, she launched her own video on her ranking of Nomad Cosmetics. And I would encourage you to go watch that. I did not watch it before I recorded mine. I didn't want it to influence my opinion in any way. But I have seen it. It is great. And she has very different tastes than I do. So you're going to see a very, very different video, even though it's the same palettes. And then, of course, if you don't like a palette, or one of my favorites isn't your favorite, or I ranked something really low that you thought should be higher, this is a no harm, no foul. We are here to love it. And if you like something, good for you. If you don't like something, I'm glad you don't have to have it. But we are here to celebrate and to love our makeup. And thank you so much for watching. So let's get into it, starting at number 31. Coming up last and in the bottom of the Nomad collection is the Lake Como palette. So I love this color story. I love this yellow, green, and blue look. This has nothing to do with the formulation and nothing to do with the color story. However, I think it's important to consider when you buy eyeshadow palettes to know your preferred size. And if this were a 12 or a 15 pan, I know I would love it a lot more. I just feel a little bit limited because it's 9. Because of the way that I classified this ranking, where I really factored in usage and how much I was actually reaching for a palette, this one ended up lower. And in fact, lowest out of all of them. But by no means is it my least favorite palette. It's just something to keep in mind when I'm shopping for palettes and why I haven't purchased some of the smaller ones that they've released. Next is the Hudson Bay collection. Now this palette has a beautiful fall color story, and although I don't like oranges and reds in particular, this palette just has the most gorgeous grays and greens and blues and fall feels that make it really feel universal. I have no complaints with the formula, again, of this palette, and no complaints with the color story, again, in this palette. This is just what happens when you buy things that are a little bit of a stretch for you. So in particular, like I said with the last palette, I know I love a 15 pan color story. I also know I prefer more than 3 shimmers. If this palette were not so matte heavy, I think it would have ranked a lot higher. Now, if you would rank this higher than me, I totally understand it because this is a beautiful palette, and again, one of my favorite color stories to look at, but when it comes to wearing on my eyes, I just don't reach for it that much. That being said, out of all my palettes, this gorgeous green row here, still absolutely one of my favorites. Next, we have Santa's Village. Now, Santa's Village ranked last out of last year for a good reason. I said last year, last time. It was not last year. It ranked very low because of the formulation, because these shimmers did go hard pressed. They were meant to be universal eyeshadows and highlighters, and they just don't work in that way. However, I did really use them a lot, especially when I was trying to make them work, and I really did like this Christmas color story at the time, and I tested out the formula on a lot of things. I was very happy with the color differentiation. I know a lot of people said these two shades are similar. They don't look any more similar on the eye than they do in the pan, so I don't really get that complaint. However, because the formula is so bad, I mean, and this is truly the only instance where I can say the formula is bad, it ended up ranking low. And if I were to, again, consider quality in this ranking, this one again be low. And in fact, the quality is why it is only third highest, because it's very, very, very pretty shimmers. They're just hard panned and difficult to use, and I don't believe your product should be difficult to use. So unfortunately, this is honestly higher than it should be, but I did really, really love it when it was brand new, and I was still trying to figure out how to make those shimmers work, and the reality is they just don't. Coming up next, we have the Cartagena Mágica palette. Now, what's really cool about this palette is I was surprised at how often I did reach for it. I find that these shimmers are absolutely stunning, and even though it is an older palette that I've had for a while, I've always been really pleased with the way that they made this orange yellow undertone palette, overtone palette, which I really don't like, something that was very wearable with the inclusion of the pinks, the purples, the mauves, the little bit desaturated shades. Overall, it has been a eyeshadow palette that I can wear, and I do reach for it for warmer tones. I have no problem with this palette. In recent years, they have really, really upped their games with special shimmers, but these are absolutely beautiful the way that they are. It's simply ranking low because, again, with it's preference. It's how much did I reach for this palette. So I can say, oh, this is a great palette, but the proof is in the pudding. I just honestly didn't wear that much because they have so many more complex and beautiful and creative and diverse releases since launch. Next, we have release of the Nomad Toscana palette, which is the sister palette to the Lake Como palette. And one of the reasons this one is ranking a little bit higher is because it is neutral, and I could wear it more often and with more variety of looks, and it became a wear to work palette as well as some other things. And it's been really classy with some warmer, some pinker, and some redder undertones. It's been really flexible in that wear. Aperitivo is a one and done shade, so I reached for it quite a bit, which is why it's ranking higher than the Lake Como palette, even though this isn't necessarily my preferred color story. It's been so versatile and reached for and useful that even though it's a 9-pan, even though it doesn't have stunning shimmers, they're beautiful, they're just not special. It's been a very valuable addition to my collection. The Encinitas palette here and the Malibu palette here I've lumped together because they are 2 4s, they're quads, and I really couldn't distinguish between the two of them. I love both of them so much. I love the pinky neutral vibe here with a pop of color, and then this one, I love this mint shade. This shimmer is beautiful. It's more like almost a satin. It's a really soft, beautiful, creamy shimmer. And then these have a green undertone, which again really helps complete the look. So I find myself going back and forth between the two and using them together. I don't really think this is their best formula because I'm really lacking in something special, but for what they are, I thought they worked really well and they work well together. This is another example of just how really good color curation can really help a palette that you might not normally gravitate toward. I can use this palette without this blue and get a look, use this palette without the green and get a look, and I can obviously combine the colors together. I can combine the lights and the darks from either palette. This made sense to me, even if individually I tend not to reach for quads. Having an 8-pan gives it a lot more versatility. I just really wish there had been a beautiful, impactful shimmer just to make the look really special and stand out. Overall, I'm glad I have these, although admittedly, they'll probably never be my favorite.
coming up is Marrakesh, and this palette was well-intentioned to purchase on my part. I really thought I was going to love it because I love these blues. I love comparing them with contrasting colors. But at the end of the day, I just didn't reach for it that much. What saved it is that it has kind of the good balance of colors. It has lights and darks, warms and cool tones, shimmers and mattes. So it's a very versatile palette, so I did use it, but we are still in the section of palettes, kind of in that lower ranking third. So I just don't think that I'm going to reach for this palette often and make looks with it daily. So here might be my first controversial take. Well, besides putting Hudson Valley so low, because I know that one is truly beautiful. But I know a lot of people fell in love with Berlin Untergrund, and I did not. Although it was my first purchase from Nomad, I've never loved it. Now I know the re-release, I should say, of the Nomad collection does have a few more mattes in it, and I do love the colors that they chose. I do think it was overall an improvement. So I do think if you kind of like this one and you're on the fence, go ahead and buy it because the re-release is truly great. But I don't mind all shimmer palette, especially with some of the formulas that Nomad uses because they play around with texture. Some of the shimmers are more impactful than others, so I think you can get away with an all shimmer palette and an all shimmer look if that's what you like, especially with this particular palette. A lot of people really, really liked the grungy tones, but I struggled a little bit with so many darks and so many golds. There's not a lot here for the people who don't want a grungy look. And again, this is a matter of taste, but it took me a long time to get into Nomad, in part because this was the first palette I had by them. And this is not necessarily probably the one that should have been my first palette, although I am truly glad I have it. And as you can see, one of the reasons that it does rank a little higher, despite having it for a long time, is I constantly dip into and have really obliterated Kreuzberg quite a bit there. So very pleased overall, just not my color story. Next, we have the Antilles palette. Now, the Antilles palette is a significantly older palette. It dates back closer to the Marrakesh time range. And it's the lowest ranking of the tropical palettes. I put Paradise Islands and Key West above this one, simply because I think those stories are a little more cohesive and a little bit more fun, and you get like the same variety of looks. It was a hard call for me to make, but at the end of the day, this is an older palette, so the shimmers are soft and beautiful but not impactful. They are a little bit more subtle, which I know a lot of people love, but I'm not subtle. That's not how I do my makeup. That's how I ended up with a palette like this. And I don't reach for it over those other two, but it's really hard to knock the palette, especially when you can create some gorgeous, gorgeous soft sunset looks. I don't regret having this palette, but again, it's really not something that I would probably pick up again in the future from another brand. It's really special to me because it was one of the earlier Nomad launches. Now we're starting to get into some of their newer releases, and this might also be a contentious pick that I put Fairy Tale Europe so low, even though it's so new, and it has these absolutely stunning, gorgeous shimmers on the inside. But there is a slight lack of cohesion in some of the shimmers that do really require you to want to be bold. If you're going to do an all shimmer look, this is not going to be your basic beginner-friendly look. There might be some creativity involved. That being said, I'm not docking it for the shimmers, which are absolutely, absolutely stunning. The formula is amazing and the shimmers are beautiful. The reason I don't reach for this palette, and I know it will not become a favorite of mine, is because it will always be a companion palette. I will reach for it when I want a particular shimmer color that I happen to know is in this palette. But it has self-destructed, in my opinion, with this row of neutrals. Now, the reason I feel like this palette self-destructed due to these neutrals is because it was lazy. When people say, oh, it's safe, you want to play with colors. No, this is not how we make our semi-neutral looks. We don't take a really bright green and pair it with black and go, oh, it's safe. It's not how it works. We don't take this really greeny gold and then pair it with like these two shades. How do we do that and play with color in a way that makes it safe? What we do is we take these very muted versions of these colors. So here in this pink quarter would have been a great opportunity to have a pink undertone. Here would have been a great opportunity to have a green or a grungy undertone. And here they went with gray and black, which perhaps fit the palette more than anything because at least you can create kind of an evil look, but it doesn't even fit with the rest of the neutrals because it's a completely different undertone. So I really don't think that this meets Nomad's quality of color story curation. It really feels like they came up with 16 beautiful shimmers and did not know what to do with the mattes. And that's really disappointing because they have other neutral palettes, which you'll see that rank higher up. Okay, I shouldn't say neutral, it's just a neutral leaning that rank higher up that show you how to incorporate neutrals in a more colorful way without being overwhelming. So because of that, I know this will never be a favorite palette. I'm glad I have it because it's beautiful. Personally, I think if you're going to commit to a color, committing to the color may actually be more flattering than combining, hot pink and beige. I don't know if that's the combination that's going to flatter a lot of people universally. So it was a swing and a miss, but they did swing hard on the shimmers, and I do appreciate that. Next up, I have the Iceland palette. This is the Land of Fire and Ice. It is a gorgeous palette. It's another one that has a beautiful color story. They did not swing and miss on this color story for sure. I thought I would reach for it more, but I do tend to reach for other palettes, and this became literally there's other palettes that have competed. Again, it's the competition of all these excellent palettes, not anything that makes this palette intrinsically bad, which is why it ranked a little bit lower because it is absolutely stunning and a fantastic palette. I think the reason it doesn't rank higher than it does is because these shimmers for me feel out of place. Although they're absolutely gorgeous and stunning and they have a very soft, like iridescent highlighty effect while still being very pigmented, I don't feel that they've gone quite as well with the palette as these 12 shades go together. I just feel like it's not my absolute favorite of their color stories, considering they've done other cool tone color stories with grungy undertones or pops of that opposing color on the wheel. I have gotten back into it recently, and the looks have turned out gorgeous every time, so I have no real complaints. But we're still not quite at the halfway point, and in particular, I like this very unique shade of Gallows Lava. Get in focus there. I just think that's so amazing. However, I know I won't reach for this palette, and it's not going to continue becoming more and more popular. The longer I use it, I've had my fun with it. It's kind of funny that Whistler Snow Lodge is next because one of the things I said about the last one is it has your cool tones with your popping of adjacent color and some grungier tones at the bottom. So they kind of follow the same formula. There's obviously no dupes between the two. I think I just slightly prefer this one, and it has some really, really special shades. I particularly like Ski Bum, which is blue with that pink reflect. I just think that is so cool. I always use it when I go for this palette. So I did rank it a little bit higher because I know it's going to have that usage for me. Overall, I have no complaints with the formula, or I have no complaints with the color story. I have no complaints with the curation. It's just, I might be a broken record. It was just there's so many other gorgeous palettes that placed on top of this. And then one of their newest releases actually came down here. Now, I love this palette. This palette reminds me so much of what the Natasha Denona's Retro Glam palette should have been. I'll sneak that in for a quick comparison. As you can see, it has the same emphasis on peaks and greens. My palette is obviously rearranged, but these are just more intense. They have more beautiful shimmers, and there's a little bit of blue and purple, so you can really get that snow bunny effect. In particular, there's another couple of really, really special shimmers. So we have Layout and Chamonix, two incredibly sparkly and iridescent special shades. I really like and appreciate that. It's a little bit more subtle and a little bit more sophisticated than the Whistler Snow Lodge. It's definitely like the big sister who's all grown up, and I absolutely, absolutely adore this palette. I think the reason it hasn't ranked higher is because it is just a little bit newer, so I haven't used it as frequently as some of the other shades. However, keep in mind, I did consider how long I've had a palette, so usage is relative to how long I've had it. And there are some newer palettes that I've been using more. But if you've been thinking about getting this palette and you love it, you won't be disappointed. Next is the Key West palette, and I think this one is really fun. I think it's bright. I think it's vibrant. One of the reasons that I don't reach for it terribly, terribly often is because, oops, it's not quite centered here in the view, is because some of the shades between Paradise Islands and Antilles and Key West, there are a few dupes. So I haven't ended up using it quite as much as I can. But this one is so vibrant and so fun and so unique from some of their other color stories outside of their tropical island theme. It is a really nice one to have. In particular, I like Southernmost Point because that like mint green is not a dupe in a lot of the shades that I already have in my collection, including the last one, Chamonix Après-Ski. And it's just flat out one of my favorite colors. That being said, there's no particular special shades. And it's a little difficult to create a monochromatic look in this palette because the lighter shades don't necessarily have corresponding darker shades. I'm fine with that, but I do understand that that makes this color story a little bit more narrow in who it appeals to. But overall, really, really happy with it. Again, though, kind of ranking in the middle. I don't think I'm going to use it proportionally more as I've had it longer and longer. I think it's probably going to hang out in the middle as something that I don't really reach for, but I do prefer it over others. So it's got a pretty solid middle spot here. Next, we have America's Parks, and America's Parks is a great example of why it's helpful to do rankings that are based on how often you use a palette, because I realized that this palette had just fallen off of my radar. But I absolutely adore this fun little row of mixed shades. They come out beautifully. They're not hard panned at all. You have the beautiful traditional shimmers, particularly this, that's purple. You'll have to forgive me, I'm looking over my camera. This beautiful, beautiful, I don't even know how to describe that. It's probably like one of my favorite colors in the world. Bluish green of the lighthouse. Like, it's just an absolutely astonishing palette, and it just wasn't on my radar, so I wasn't wearing it. But it has the utility, it has the brightness, it has the ability to do monochromatic looks, it has the, I don't even know how to describe this, but it's like neutral enough I could wear it to work. So that's where I got a lot of use out of it, was this column actually. And I want to wear it more, so I'm gonna start pulling it up kind of from the back of my collection and start using it more, because it is just gorgeous, and every look I make out of it, I'm so happy. Here is the Okavango palette, and now it has this fuzzy, really fun textured cover, and inside is a more neutral leaning color story. And this is what I was talking about when I said there's a way to do neutral that brings in a little bit of color that isn't scary. One of the reasons this doesn't rank higher is these shades are a little bit harder pressed. They mix together absolutely fine on the finger, but I know there was some criticism. I don't think they're too hard pressed to use at all. It's not like the Santa's Village palette, but I do know some people would prefer it to be a little bit more creamy. However, I have very oily lids, and I think this formula on me works just fine. I particularly like the yellow and orange and grungy undertones with a few more intense greens that just really make this palette come alive for me. So I wear it a lot when I want to play with color, when I need to lean entirely neutral, or when I actually just need a murky, earthy green. So there's a lot of versatility in this palette with the color, with the lights and the darks and the mattes and the shimmers. It's just really, really beautifully balanced palette. Again, this is not normally a color story I pick, but I am so glad I did. And that's why this palette ranks more highly in frequency of usage, even though it actually would rank a little bit lower if I were just looking at color story alone. But this is actually something that I reach for relatively frequently among my Nomad palettes. Next is Royal Europe. It has the 3D textured plates, which I don't like because it does come up a little bit, but it's cool and unique, and I applaud them for trying. And the inside is so stunning and gorgeous. I wonder if I can play. So that, oh yeah, as I angle the bottom against the camera, you can see the shift. Those are true duochromes. I know a lot of people like say things that are duochromes, but what they really just mean is complex shimmer. Like there's multiple shimmer shades in it, glitter particles of different reflex, but that's not really what a duochrome is. These are true pigments that allow light to pass through at one angle and bounce back a different color at another angle. That's what makes it a duochrome, and these are true duochromes, which made the palette just a tiny bit more expensive, but absolutely worth it if you like duochromes. I also love the curation. I think having colors to go with each of these was very smart so that the shades so that you don't end up with beautiful shades that you can't use. But I don't reach for this quite as often because it is only this color of duochromes and I don't have an inner corner highlight. The colors don't go light enough. There's no softer pastel shades. This is a truly colorful, truly highly saturated palette that's not as versatile as some of their other ones. That being said, I reach for it, especially when I want to do a duochrome from Nomad because I know there's in this palette and they're fantastic. And of course, let's not forget every look I've created with this palette has been absolutely stunning. Next up, we have the Ireland Wild Atlantic Way palette. And they did something else with green. They had the opportunity to be a boring basic all green palette, and they did not. They made sure there were neutrals. I love this like cool toned silver. I love metallics that really lean away from gold and away from silver into something that's a little bit unique and hard to describe. I love Giagit. I love how they played with green so that there's different undertones and gold reflex in this one. Again, you have another neutral shimmer here. In Schlan, you have it's almost like the opposite. It's a gold with green undertones. They go so well together. And you have your neutrals at the bottom row. Mullen Head's a little bit yellow for me to call it a neutral, but if you have a gold undertone, it's great for your blending and transitioning. There's lights and darks, and overall, I love the looks you can create with this, and you don't even have to walk away and use a single green eyeshadow to make a gorgeous look out of this. I know that there's some complaints that between these three, there's not a big step. I'll go ahead and swatch. And that's true. There's not a huge step between the three. If they had wanted to do two, they probably could have, but overall it's not problematic for me, and it is a green themed palette, so that's probably not quite the thing I would complain about. But it's something to be considered if you're one of the people who doesn't like dupes. You're not going to want to have three shades so similar to each other in a palette. As a result, I used this a lot more than I thought I would. However, I am going to be kind of honest. I don't reach for it unless I'm doing a green look. It's not the first palette that I think of, so it's keeping it from ranking higher. However, I do think it's going to hold its own because it is so unique. And one thing that's really cool about it, and you'll like this, is when I compare it to the Monteverde palette, you'll see why these greens are so different. So here is that Bosque Nuboso de Monteverde. This is a Costa Rican rainforest theme palette, and it is stunning. And they do have some matte greens, but you'll see tonally, they are very different. Glass Wings is much more green based than Taunt. Green Spiny Lizard has a much brighter yellow base than Grog Patrick. They're just very, very different greens, and the greens in Ireland Wild Atlantic Way are matte, and the greens here are predominantly shimmers. So there are some mattes, but they're very bright and almost neon, and all these shimmers have the coolest undertones. Look at a green with a pink undertone. That is so unusual. They have, I particularly like Magic Mist. I think it has a bluish silver undertone, and it works really well with some of the other brighter pops of colors. And I can tell that their theming was like the bright flowers and animals popping through the rainforest. When you looked at this palette, it is absolutely stunning. But not duping those shades of green in two primarily green palettes was such a smart move, and I really appreciate not feeling like I was buying the same palette twice. I also didn't really notice until someone pointed it out to me that this is a version of a rainbow palette. There's your red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple, and then there's a pink and a red. These are very bright, intense, matte neons. It's just green heavy with a lot of green shimmers. And I think, again, from a color curation standpoint, this is so beautiful and it's so colorful. There's a lot of different looks you can make, hence why it ranks somewhat high on the palettes that I reach for. Now, I do have a confession. This palette actually ranked below Monteverde and in between it and Ireland, but I wanted to compare those two palettes directly so you could see them together, so I switched presentation. But this is actually a little bit lower than the last one. But this is actually not quite as high ranking as Monteverde. For obvious reasons, it's just not quite the same. This is got some really cool formulas. There's like some softer shimmers and some like a little bit more glimmery, impactful. You can see when I compare them. There are some different formulas here that I really like. I love the range of pink and orange and green and blue and purple. They all complement each other. The whole palette is really cohesive. This is very much my style, which is like a bright pastel. I think that this is a really excellent palette, and so I reached for it a lot, and that's why I reached for it more than the Antilles or Key West, is I feel like this color story as a whole is more cohesive in the sense that you could pick any 2 or 3 colors from anywhere on the palette and have them go together. So overall, really, really gorgeous palette. It is, however, not my highest ranked pastel palette, as you'll see in the next 2. Up next is the Fête de Provence. And I think if you're going to go for a soft look, you really can't beat this palette. This one actually got my number 1 when I reviewed it for color story and quality and capturing of sort of the feel of the area, which surprised me because it's not my most used palette. But we are getting up there. We are approaching the top third. So this does tell you how gorgeous these are. I think this shimmer is a little bit, I don't know if rough is the right word. It's not rough at all. It's not a texture thing. I think it's just a little bright for the rest of the palette. But they're so gorgeous and the looks are so pretty when worn together. I do love combining the columns and going up and down for a look. And then, of course, you can always cross over. It's very well curated. It's very beautiful. It's very colorful, but also very safe at the same time. You know, if you want a gray and a black, this is a really, really, really good alternative that is still safe than just doing a row of bright shimmers and putting some browns in the background. This was very, very thoughtful, very well made, and even though there's only 5 shimmers in a 15 pan, I do feel like that's enough with how incredibly gorgeous and well laid out this is to create a look. In fact, it actually reminds me of the Simply Posh formula setup, which actually does quite well for them as well. So I was very happy to see this palette from Nomad, and I will continue to use it. So here is the final true pastel, like bright and playful pastel palette. And it is my favorite. Even though it's an older palette, I still continue to use it because you have this gorgeous soft row of mattes. The slightly older but pretty satin row. I do like satins. I know some people don't, but this is about my usage and I will use a satin anywhere. And then these really, really shimmery shades. My favorite is Moshi Moshi. Again, you know I love that green. And then I think Otaku is really pretty. That one's also shimmery and really appropriate as a topper or as simply as your base color. So because there's 3 formulas and because these are all beautiful pastels, I just find myself reaching for these bright pastels all of the time. In fact, even though no one's making me, I'm going to compare it to the Natasha Denona pastel palette, and you'll see that these are actually more pastel. These are actually even softer and brighter, and you get a better variation of finishes. So I actually prefer Nomad's take on it. That being said, they're both excellent palettes. And I think that says something for the quality if you can compare it to a Natasha Denona palette. So this is a great example of, hey, your older palettes can still be a much loved, much appreciated palette. I have not stopped using this even though it's older. Next up we have the Orient Express palette, and it has a fun cover, but I will admit I almost didn't get it. Even though I think this luxury is perfect, the blue velvet is perfect, I love the era and I love Art Deco and I loved the pops of color, and something about these neutrals just made me went, eh. It wasn't for me and it didn't feel cohesive. But when I started wearing it and using it, it was just kind of like, oh, I'll try it and I have to. I'm like, oh, I'll do this with it. Ooh, I've got a couple looks here. And it just became, ironically, such a safe palette for me to reach and grab and use that I use this one way more than I ever thought I would. And I'll be honest, it has nothing to do with these pops of colors. It is the fact that I can create a pink leaning neutral look, a champagne colored neutral look, a bright white neutral. I can use a shimmer or a bright white in my inner corner. I have a little bit of a green base here. This pink can be all over the lid and still look very, very natural and neutral. As you see, it's just a little bit, oh, my fingers are so green from that last palette. I'll use my left hand. As you see, it's just got a very soft, subtle, natural pink that goes great with your looks. So I just found myself reaching for this palette a lot. It's still not my favorite palette, but when I consider what really works in a color story, this is how you incorporate neutrals, by paying attention to your primary colors and making sure that those are incorporated in your undertones so that you can create some really cohesive looks using neutrals and pops of color. I will vote this as your safe introduction to color above almost any palette that's just a really wild color and a brown. And now you guys are understanding and hearing again for the third time why Fairy Tale Europe ranked so low for me. I'll reach for this one before I reach for that one because I know the neutrals in here are going to give me what I want. Next up, we have Polar Express, and what's really cool about this palette is, unlike the previous palette, which I don't feel like I'm going to use more than I currently do, I feel like I kind of maxed it out and used it for neutrals when I needed to go to work, and now that I'm not going to work, I'm playing more with my colors, so I'm really seeing palettes like this starting to climb that ladder. There's still a row of neutrals, but I've got these gorgeous reds, golds, and blues. I love gold and blue together. Here's one of those like crazy shades that I'm like, is it bronze? Is it bronze? Like, it's a metallic brown, but it's not gold. It's not bronze. Like, what is it? It's just such that perfect neutral shimmer. I love playing with that. This matte is to die for. It's pigmented. It's opaque. It's intense. It is one of my absolute favorite shades, and I'm going to be playing with this more and more. Additionally, even though they've done a white before in their palettes, they've done two whites, this is the best one. This is opaque and bright and clean and white. This is their best white. So overall, I reach for this palette a lot because it has the quality behind it and it has these beautiful colors that I appreciate, and I can see myself using it more and more, even though it's kind of a recent release. It's less than a year at this point, so this will be really, really exciting for me to continue using it. Next up, we have the Salem Witch City palette, and I'm ranking it, but I do want you guys to keep in mind, because this palette came out, I've had it for less than a month, it is more like an honorable mention. This is where I kind of think it's going to place. So if we open it up, we do see that Halloween vibe, and we do see some really, really cool colors. I love Old Burning Point. I love Halloween. Like, what color is that? Is that brown or purple? I don't know, but it's absolutely stunning. I really think they've done a great job with the curation, having very light, pretty light, a little bit deeper, and then some saturated tones, some deep tones. They've got grungy and bright. They've got shimmers and mattes, lights and darks. You know the drill. Witching Hour, I think, is actually my favorite. You're getting a lot of swatches with this one because it's so pretty. And I think the only reason that I'm not going to rank it higher is because I just don't like the color story as much as some other ones, so I don't think I'm going to reach for it. But if you want to play safe with it, there's some pretty good curation here. There's definitely a green look, definitely a red look, definitely a purple look, definitely an orange look. Like, you can definitely have fun with this one. But I just don't think the color story is for me. I'm definitely going to lean into these shades right here, and probably these three light grayish purple colors, because I really, really like that. I like my brights and my pastels, as you know. I'm probably not going to go spooky and play with these dark tones. That being said, I've created many looks with this palette, and that's how I know it's going to be a favorite, but probably not my most favorite. But such a great gift. My husband bought it for me, and I haven't let him know. Next is the Route 66 palette, which I also am kind of giving the same caveat. This is more like an honorable mention. I did break it and hit pan already, but that's okay. And I adore these bright shimmers. You can see I kind of bit into them pretty intensely already, and I think they did a great job. I'm going lights and darks, neutrals and shimmers, some neon colors that have the appropriate undertones in the mattes around them to make them work. A very intense glittery shade that looks almost like foil when you rub it out, and then consistent, creamy, opaque, beautifully formulated mattes. I think I'm going to like this one a lot. I know I am going to play with the right side of the palette the most. I don't see myself using this side. And what is with me comparing these two Natasha Denona palettes? This is my third one. Here it is in the Zendo form. And again, I really prefer Nomad's take on it. That is just so much better. So again, just so you can get a second look, here is Natasha Denona's. And here is this one. It just expands the color correction, the color curation in a different direction. Even though this is only an extra 3 shades, it just feels like they're more. The only exception would be if you really want pink, a pink leaning neutral palette, this isn't for you because it does pull a little orange or peach. But I absolutely do not care. I think this is a phenomenal, phenomenal palette. And I think my usage is going to go up, despite it being such a new palette. Next, we have Ghost Town, and I love this palette so much. I am in my top 10, and one of the things that I like about this palette is, again, its versatility. Lights, darks, shimmers, mattes, columns by hue if you don't want to have to think so much each day, and just really, really gorgeous looks. You can go neutral, you can go smoky, you can go grungy, you can stay light, or you can just go all out and do a really dramatic look. I end up using this palette a lot on days when I just want an effortlessly gorgeous look that's neutral enough to go with everything, but isn't going to be plain. It's safe. I play predominantly with the blues and greens. I think I've mentioned that in my other palettes, but my favorite shades are actually Quicksilver and Rhyolite, which are stunning. I didn't swatch them very hard, so they didn't look as stunning on camera because the shades are so soft. They are actually a little bit too soft, but that does not factor in at all when I reach for these palettes. So that's just something to keep in mind for you if you have a preference. But I am so in love with those shades, I don't even think about it until I'm swatching it and I press way too hard and I'm like, whoa, go easy on the pressure there. But this is probably one of their best palettes with such broad appeal. I could really see a lot of people being happy with this palette, even if your tastes aren't quite the same as mine, because no matter your skin complexion or your undertone for your skin, there's going to be something that's flattering and suits you. Next up is the Haunted Europe palette. It's the last of the spooky palettes that they launched so far, but I really do appreciate it. I had to wait until the re-release. I wasn't able to get the original one, so this is a re-release. And I did not think I was going to like this, which is actually why I kind of hesitated and missed out on the first one, because I don't do grunge. But if you look at this palette, these shimmers are so stunning. Like, even this dark shimmer is just perfect for like a smoky glam look. And then my personal favorite is like this phantasmic shifty green. Just reminds me of ectoplasm so perfectly. They called it Highgate Cemetery, but it is absolutely ghastly in the best possible way. And I kind of challenged myself to do this palette. I didn't film it, I wish I had, but I did this palette and I did 7 looks over 7 days with it, and I got 7 really different looks, which is super cool. And I'm still reaching for it because there's still some really, really unique shades. Like Black Forest is not black, it's this gorgeous navy blue. And then what is Brand Castle but another, like, it's not gray, it's actually purple. So there's some unique shades, and I know there's other, grayish purples in my collection. I pointed out one in the Provence palette, and I know there's one in the previous palette, but they're all different. And it's just really well curated, fun palette that I never get tired of. And comparing Comparing it to the Witch City palette, again, you can see that the greens are completely different. The oranges have completely different undertones, and the purples have completely different undertones. There's no hot pink in the Witch City, so just going back and forth, you can really see that there's no dupes. They've created two completely different Halloween palettes and really nailed them both. I just reached for this one, I think, because the undertones and the looks that I do are just a little bit more appealing on this one. I don't think I'm going to use this one any more than I already have, so I think, maybe in a few years' time this one will be lower in the rankings, but I am really glad I was able to get a hold of it. Right, as we enter the top three, we have another really fun velvet packaging. I love this graphic design. I love the 1920s aesthetically. They did it again. They came out with this beautiful row of duochromes. They played with the right bands of neutral. These neutrals have the undertone for the palette. There's an inner corner highlight. There's lots of deep shades, lots of transitioning shades. And even though this is a little bit gray toned, it's not going to be flattering on quite a few people. The lavender in it makes it flattering on quite a few people. If you don't want to look gray and washed out and zombified, the way you do that is by adding purple. And purple adds that delicate, almost petal softness that you might get with a pink. And they've got this beautiful gradient and variation of it. They do have a contrasting row, a different color here that really plays with it. And let's see if I can get it so you can see the duochrome shimmers. So you can really see that reflect. I am so happy with this palette. I reach for it all the time because, again, it's so easy to work with and the looks you can do so effortlessly without thinking. Again, they do a great job of arranging my column, but you don't even need to do that in that palette. It's that easy. Either one of these palettes to blend, either of these in the midtone, any of these dark ones to deepen, and you can create cool and warm and green. Southside's my favorite, of course. That's why there's absolutely no imprint left on it. But that's what it looks like. True duochromatic action. And here's Jinriki, just because I know a lot of people would be very curious as to see what this swatches. So this is why this is my third most used palette, is it's just so easy to use and gravitate toward and grab. I can't sing its praises enough. There is, however, a palette that I like even more, and that is Fuji 5 Lakes. This has a canvas-like texture on the cover, which is absolutely gorgeous. And these are my fall vibes. Not the Hudson Valley fall vibes, but these. When I wear warm tones and I wear reds and oranges, this is what I go for. I might compare it with blue and get that cross. I might not. I think Red Rowan is a beautiful transition shade, again, with the right undertone for the palette. I think Mount Fuji with this really soft, icy blue is really pretty. And of course, Diamond Fuji steals the star of the show every time. It's more blue and impactful than some of the other duochrome or shimmers that I have shown you. And I also really like gray undertones in my blues. And I've got 4 of them here that are absolutely stunning. And Pampas Grass, which is a great all over the lid shade. Remember when I was talking about the Toscana palette and Aperitivo and how I kept using that as a one and done? Pampas Grass fulfills that same role for me. So this is just a gorgeous all over the lid shade that really is going to be flattering towards a lot of different skin tones. So I reach for this one a lot. I think the only reason I don't reach for it the most over all of my palettes is because there aren't really neutrals here. So I can't play it safe, and I do have to pay a little bit of attention to what I'm wearing first before I go grab this color palette. But last but not least, here is my most used palette, the New Zealand Stargazing. And this should be no surprise to anyone who remembers it launching last year. It is gorgeous. They also have duochromes in this palette. These are 2 duochromes as well. They have dark and light, but they also have neutrals. The neutrals are very flattering, and you can pair them with another shade for a gorgeous look. I want you guys to see how gold and greeny that undertone is. And then with Aurora Australis, I want you to see how pink that undertone is and how reflective that is. Now you can see for yourself the gold and the pink and the blue because those colors are so intense. and they have all these green shifts. So very, very spacey, very beautiful. You can do soft looks, you can do bold looks, you can do dark smoky looks, you can do neutral looks, soft looks. This is just my favorite palette, and I wouldn't even known to say it was my favorite based alone on the color story had I not looked at the data to see how often I was actually using it, which is really cool. Because even though, according to my eyes, I liked the Fête de Provence more, or I liked the Polar Express more, the fact is I reach for this one pretty consistently. And I don't use it that much, but again, it's only a year old. So I'm looking at how often I've used it compared to palettes that I've had for multiple years, and it just knocks them out of the park. So that's my ranking. I'm kind of interested to know what you guys think because everyone's opinion is different, but that's kind of what makes it interesting.